we continue with Abraham's last years in Genesis chapter 25 as we read from verses 5 to 11. So we just heard that Abraham had 16 children through Keturah. So now we can finish. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. And unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward into the east country. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 163 years. In English, 175. And Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah. That's the cave that he purchased, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, which is before Mamre. The field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, there we got it. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass, after the death of Abraham, that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelled by the well, Lahai Roi. We discussed this before. That's the same well where Hagar stopped and God spoke to her. Now, after reading the editorial remark made by Moses concerning the children of Keturah, we read that Abraham gave all he had to Isaac. After all, Isaac was the son of promise. Right? Then we continue. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. Here is another explanation why Keturah's children ended up settling everywhere from Jordan eastward. Eastward. But it didn't just mention Keturah. It says the sons of the concubines. Abraham must have sent Ishmael away too, to prevent a dispute of the inheritance with Isaac after his death. As we discussed in our previous session, any wife next to Sarah, his soulmate, his true wife, any wife next to her, the Bible considers her a concubine. So, he died at 175 years of age. Working with the facts as presented in Genesis, Abraham was 137 and Isaac 37 years old when Sarah died. Now, Isaac was 40 years old when he married. And remember, the math is very simple. Abraham had Isaac when he was 100. So it's easy to figure out, isn't it? And Sarah was exactly 10 years younger than he was. So let's repeat that. Abraham was 137 and Isaac 37 years old when Sarah died. So when Isaac was 40 years old when he married, he had already moved out on his own. Now, this is not in the Bible, but I wonder if Abraham marrying Keturah may have caused some sort of conflict, making it necessary for Isaac to move out. After all, everything around him, everything reminded him of his mom. And in case you had forgotten, Isaac took his mom's tent with him into southern Canaan. In either case, when he died, Abraham was anywhere from 35 to 38 years living with Keturah. If this relationship with her was after Sarah died, we don't know for sure. But we conjecture everything happened after Sarah died. But having 6 children, wow. Abraham died without physically owning any of the land. Do you realize that? When Abraham died, he didn't own anything except the cave and field which he had paid. He paid for that. But don't you realize all was his anyway? He was fully persuaded of God's faithfulness. Consider what it says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 13. Abraham died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and was persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that he was a stranger and pilgrim on earth. Aren't we all? We ought to consider ourselves a stranger and pilgrim on the earth, reaching for our eternal home in heaven. Those who had known him in named, his brother, and Bethuel, his brother through Milcah had so many children, and Abram. Well, those are the people who had known him in Ur, might have looked on his life as a huge failure, and may have spoken to him as a fanatic who sacrificed everything for nothing. But Abraham was satisfied. That's what it says. And it says he was gathered to his people, which is a phrase which referred to the recognition and welcome that awaited him on the other side of death. It's also a phrase that mentioned that similar to what we use today. May he rest in peace. He was gathered to his people. By the way, as we study further, it's interesting to note that Abraham was alive for 16 years at the same time as his grandsons Esau and Jacob. That's how long his life was. Although he's never mentioned again, but it's interesting to note this, isn't it? Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah to lie beside his beloved Sarah. Too bad for Keturah. She was now out of the picture. He was interred beside Sarah. Though Isaac lived by the well in southern Canaan, engaged in pastoral pursuits, Isaac really was he stayed there and he was laid back. He was not an adventuresome fella. He was just, today we would call him a nerd. But he was so different from Ishmael. And while Ishmael lived by his own strong hand in the desert, north of Arabia and all over, these two brothers met in their common respect and grief. You realize births and deaths often have a way of uniting families in that way, don't they? They had resolved their differences and paid respect to their dad. And so we close this section with God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahairoi. You know, it is really fitting that Isaac lived by the well Lahairoi really means well of the living one who sees me. It's fitting that Isaac lived by that well. And you see that name served as a constant reminder that God sees me. You realize that since Jesus Christ came to this earth, died, was buried, and rose again, the Holy Spirit is a constant reminder that God watches over me. Now, too, scary thought, isn't it?